And at
No.
Okay, so I am going to start with some background and then I'll just go into the results of the audit and then the corrective action plans that we have included in the report as a result of those findings. So in the audit began in January 2026, immediately after the FY 24 audit was issued with some offsite document testing. This is the phase of the audit where they requested documentation for our policies and sample selections for transactions and submit them to their online portal. All those documents were submitted timely and they had all the documentation they needed by the time they started their site visit in February 2026. So the auditors were here for about 3 days in February, and at that time they conducted interviews with staff and they completed some additional task work. They reported that they were able to complete 90% of their test work by the end of that site visit. And they also reported that Mountain Line staff were available and responsive for timely submission of documents and information. So other than the audit findings that we will discuss later, the testing and compliance with other laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements disclosed no other instances of non-compliance. All significant transactions have been recognized in the proper period, and reasonable estimates were developed by staff for depreciation of assets. No difficulties or disagreements were experienced in dealing with management. Mountain Line did not consult with any other firms for second opinions, and Mountain Line at this time does not qualify as a low-risk auditee, although we hope to hear this within the next year with our corrective action plans. The financial, as far as the financial statements go, they are fairly presented with an unmodified opinion. However, on our federal transit cluster in the schedule of expenditures and federal reports, we do have a qualified opinion due to the three material weakness findings listed here. And I'll kind of go over what those findings are for. So the first material weakness finding was a finding over internal controls over accounting records and segregation of duties. So in this finding, this was due to a lack of review procedures and a lack of segregation of duties that allowed misconduct by an employee and a breakdown of internal controls over accounting records. The second material weakness finding was over internal controls over financial reporting. So for this finding, we had about $1.4 million in revenue and receivables that should have been reported in FY 24. But the revenue wasn't drawn down until well after FY 25 had started and was not included in the FY 24 financials, resulting in a misstatement of the ending net position for fiscal year 2024. And then the final material weakness finding was over cash management. And some of this is for the due to the internal controls over financial reporting finding. So for this $1.4 million, it wasn't, they issued a finding because this wasn't requested timely. And we also had an additional $1.1 million that did not have proper support to back up the federal drawdowns for those expenditures. So I should pause for questions or go into the corrective action plan. Do you have any questions on the findings themselves? Okay. So for the corrective action plans, and the information, all of the details for these corrective action plans is included in the audit report itself. This is just a summary of our action plan. So for the first finding, for the internal control over accounting records and segregation of duties, we have already implemented segregation of duties in the payroll processing system. So the same employee who is processing payroll is no longer the same employee who is maintaining the records for the base compensation for employees. So that has already been implemented. All pay rate changes are going through multiple steps of workflow in our payroll system. For the payroll review process, we have implemented a multi-step review process where 3 employees at this point are reviewing records with an emphasis on a manual pay record change report, where these 3 employees are looking for other employees who had access to the payroll system and could have made changes to their own record. The secondary part of this review is also to make sure that all manual changes have the appropriate support and approval needed for those changes. We have also implemented a timeline for bank reconciliation and review. So bank reconciliations are to be completed by the 10th of every month and reviewed and approved by the CEO by the end of the month. And we are currently doing that. We are also working to centralize user management and security roles within the IT department. So what this is intended to do is to make it so that the super users in the financial systems who are posting transactions are not the same employees who are approving user security roles within those same systems. We've also implemented workflow for our manual journal entries. So all manual journal entries are entered by staff and reviewed and approved by a secondary qualified individual. We're also providing ongoing staff training for staff regarding documentation requirements for expenses. So we all know that we need to submit itemized receipts for all of our expenses, but it's just a continuing messaging so that people are reminded and are aware of the expectations. And we've also implemented enhanced workflow approvals for invoices. So all invoices are going through at least 2 levels of approval, sometimes 3, depending on the value of the transaction. We have also removed from our bank account the ability to make direct wire payments to vendors, and all vendor payments are going through our official account payable system. So for the internal control over financial reporting finding, we are currently developing standardized procedures for real-time general ledger monitoring and reconciliation. And I say that we are working on this because we have 265 separate general ledger accounts, all with different types of transactions that go in there and all with unique needs for the reconciliation and monitoring of those transactions. So it is a work in progress, but we're working on it. Staff are also attending formal training sponsored by our accounting system vendor. They provide regular webinars and they're free as a customer of their product. So when we see something that we think is valuable to us, then we attend those trainings and they're available to answer questions. And we also have developed an audit timeline. Well, our auditors have developed an audit timeline and an audit checklist to ensure timely single audit completion. And we will be using this for the FY 2026 audit. And finally, for the cash management finding, we have a requirement that higher level management will review and authorize all federal reimbursement requests. This has already been implemented. So all federal drawdowns are being reviewed by the CEO at this point. All the reimbursement requests will be submitted and reconciled at least monthly. So this currently is happening as well, rather than waiting 9 months into the next fiscal year to do the drawdowns. We are doing this on a monthly basis for every program. And then the documentation will be reviewed, showing their reimbursement requests match those federal expenditures being claimed on the requests. So part of this finding was that we did not retain the appropriate documentation for those requests. So the drawdown requests do include all that documentation and it's saved in the standardized format in our share drive. So as a summary of our corrective action plans, do we have any questions on those actions?
I do, and it's related to the segregation slide that you had with segregation duties. So, recognizing that, the concern that was identified, really helped highlight that these controls were not in place. Had they not been in place prior to this year's audit period?
So yeah, some of them were, some of them were not. Some of them were in place, but not being enforced.
Okay.
So right now we have put several controls in the system where we have been able to workflow for journal entries and things where the system was not fully being utilized. Yeah, so are you,
So my question is really getting to whether these control issues are exclusive to this year or previous years, and if they're also these, why were they, if they were in previous years, why they were not identified?
yeah, I think the breakdown of some of these internal controls came with the implementation of our new system. And so the impression that I get is having not been here when they were implemented was that staff was focused on efficiency and not on internal controls, which is a worthy goal. We certainly don't want to be wasting staff time on things, but the focus I think was on maybe just having one or two people do things, because why would you have multiple people do things when one person can do it? It may be like an mentality, right? Like how many government employees does it take to pay an invoice? A lot if you're doing it right. And so, so that's my impression. So as we've been going through and looking at segregation of duties, it is probably, I would say we've started hearing this since I started in September. So yes, some of these weaknesses may not existed in the beginning of this fiscal year, but the review of transactions that we're doing for this fiscal year's general ledger would have brought up anything, if any malfeasance had occurred before the segregation of duties was implemented.
Thank you. Other questions?
Thank you for your work on this.
So, actually, go ahead.
Hours of meeting, but
No, I
it's a lot to relook at everything and restructure, so.
yeah, I'm happy here.
If I may, before we could go to the last slide, asking for your action, I really do want to recognize, I think I have, but I'll say it again. We wouldn't be sitting in this position with a timely report without Megan. Megan, since starting in September, has really brought that experience and expertise to recognize that we have policies and procedures in place, one, that weren't being followed, and finding ways to ensure that we're checking to be sure they're followed within all the various team members, but two, looking for automated systems that don't allow someone to skip those policies and procedures. And I think, Chair Merritt, that's kind of to your point. And a lot of that's Megan, that's the expertise Megan's bringing, that's the focus that Megan is bringing. It's been a lot to clean up 2 years of just audit, not to mention, as we're moving through that and turning through that, checking what's happened this year, looking for and implementing corrective action, even on this year, things that we need, memos to files. We're not paying that because you need to do these things first. Steps, it's been a real learning curve. We have internal controls. We have policies and procedures. Our prior lead in finance shortcut those in a lot of ways for efficiencies. And with the implementation of the new software, and the challenges we had in 24 around that software, a lot of things, I didn't catch them. I will own that. Jackie didn't catch that. She will own that. The good news is I really think that with this report, we're fresh foot forward. I keep saying we're just almost out from underneath that black cloud that we've had hanging over our head really since December of 24. And I just credit a lot of that to Megan.
Thank you. So understanding we're on the right path from everything that I understand, you mentioned that we are not a low risk auditee, right?
Yes, because of the findings that have been discovered.
What's the timeline? So do we have to wait till the next fiscal year to become a low risk
We
auditee?
would, yes, they would let us know after they, depends on how the audit goes,
Okay.
next year.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for your work.
And then one quick reminder, I know we need to get to action, you guys have stayed much longer than intended, and I appreciate that, is that we have although the March 31st is a federal deadline, our commitment to the city and to our partners is December 15th. So we are pushing ourselves to deliver much faster, much sooner. And part of that is when you have audit findings that come up this far into your current fiscal year, how do you correct for those? And so really wanting to address that concern and I know she's not here, but Director Matthews brought that up several times. When you're this delayed in audits, you've now carried those problems into a new year. And we can certainly see that here. So just wanted to offer that to you. Our new deadline is December 15th. And I think we kick off audit in June versus waiting till end of fiscal year now.
Yes, they can start testing internal controls in June, and we will get it done by December, because I do not want to be stacking audit on top of budget, so. Just for my own personal sanity, and we'll get that by December 15th.
It's fair. Thank you.
So, do we need an action?
Right, so we're looking for a motion.
Let's see. I move that we approve the fiscal year 2025 financial audit report as completed by Highfield Beach and filed as required by March 31st, 2026. And approve the related correction action plans for implementing changes necessary to ensure financial management is done within policy and as required by regulations.
Second.
Doesn't matter to me, here we go, I'm going to around. Has been moved and seconded, do you have any additional comment? Okay, looking for a vote, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, staff, thank you, Megan, appreciate it. So, items from committee and staff, anything additional from staff? Okay, we'll, the next, board meeting will be April 15, 2026, and we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Well.